to 200-200. This is the Ross Kaminsky Show. Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you. I'm Ross, and we got a lot to do today. Of course, we're going to talk quite a bit about the trade war thing. We are, as producer Shannon might say, efforting to get our guest on the line with us, and we'll do that in a moment. But we got a lot to talk about because yesterday we saw the Dow Jones Industrial Average fall by over 600 points. Futures up a little bit this morning, and these are the kinds of bounces that, we've talked about this in the past. These are the kinds of bounces that I really don't trust. I've said it over and over and over again in the time that I've been on this show. My experience with stock markets is ugly markets like we've had for the past week or so, down 13 or 1,400 points in the Dow. Don't end quietly with just, okay, that was it, and now we're going to be up for the rest of the time. And usually when I see markets like this, this up opening kind of thing after a day like we had yesterday, usually that is a time to sell, not a time to buy in. The up opening is usually a sell. But, I'm not trading, so talk is cheap. Talk is cheap, so we'll see what happens. I wanted to share with you some sound from a couple of days ago. Larry Kudlow on the Sunday shows, and he was asked by Chris Wallace on Fox News about tariffs, and the conversation, which actually got quite a lot of attention in the media yesterday, went like this.
Not China that pays tariffs. It's the American importers, the American companies that pay what in effect is a tax increase and oftentimes passes it on to U.S. consumers.
Fair enough. In fact, both sides will pay. Both sides will pay in these things. And, of course, it depends.
If it's a tariff on goods coming into the country, the Chinese aren't paying.
No, but the Chinese will suffer GDP losses and so forth with respect to a diminishing export market and goods that they may need for their own
I understand that, but the president says that China, it pays the tariffs. They may suffer consequences, but it's U.S. businesses and U.S. consumers who pay, correct?
Yes, to some extent. I don't disagree with that. Again, both sides will suffer on this.
So at least Kudlow is starting to come around to an honest answer, right? Unlike the president that he's working for. And there was an interesting piece at The Hill by our friend Steve Moore, who says, here's the headline, why free traders and all Americans should back Trump on China policy. So I want to make sure I'm really careful on this, because a lot of times you get into some of these conversations and it's odd. It's a lot like what Shannon Bream said when we had her on the show yesterday. You talk about something, anything related to Trump in particular, and you'll get one email or one tweet saying, why are you a never Trumper, and why do you hate President Trump? And then the very next email will say, why are you taking your talking points from President Trump? So I try to be really careful about this. And in particular, when it comes to trade, I do think President Trump gets a lot of stuff, in fact, almost everything wrong. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a very serious problem with China. And it might just be, maybe, that the only way to address it is by doing what Trump is doing. I don't know if that's true. What I know is I would at least like to start the debate with an honest conversation about who is paying for what. And so with that, I am just so pleased to be joined again on our VIP line by my good friend of 25 or 30 years, Steve Moore, who wrote the piece I just mentioned to you in The Hill. Good morning, Steve. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Ross. Good morning.
So, Steve, can we just start off with one just baseline thing that seems like it's been hard for the Trump administration and impossible for Trump himself to say? And that is, do you agree that Americans pay the tariffs?
With respect to China, the issue, debate about this. Now, certainly, a lot of it is borne by American consumers. Buy Chinese goods at Walmart or whatever it might be.
Hey, Steve, your cell phone's breaking up. I can barely hear you. I wonder if you can get in a better spot.
Better now?
We'll see. All right, so try again.
Can you hear me better now?
Yep, that seems better.
So, I was saying that, certainly a lot of the cost of any tariff is borne by the consumer who goes to Walmart or buys anything that's made in China. Those things are going to be an additional cost to the consumer because a tariff is just a tariff. But there is data that's come out on the 10% China back last year.
You know what, Steve? The signal is breaking up so much, it is really hard to hear you. I wonder if there's a better spot you can get to, or if we should try you back or something. All right. Okay. So, producer Shannon, we'll try again and see if we can get Steve in a better spot. Look, I know it's very, very hard for the Trump people to say Americans are paying the tariffs. Now, there's a possibility that Chinese exporters are slightly lowering their prices to kind of absorb some of what otherwise would be higher costs to Americans through the tariff, but that's not the same as paying the tariff. And I want to be really clear about one thing. And that is when President Trump talks about billions of dollars having come into the Treasury because of the tariffs, all of those dollars come from Americans. All right, let's see if Steve's got a better cell connection now. Hey, let's try again, Steve. How are you there?
Can you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah, so much better. All right.
Okay. So what I was saying, because I was crackling in and out, is that there is some interesting evidence that from the 10% tariff that Trump imposed on China last year, that because markets are so competitive now, that Chinese producers had to eat the tariff by reducing their prices and by making, so that the stuff that was brought into here was cheaper, and then the 10% tariff was put on top of it. So, but I agree with your main point that a tariff is a tax on the American consumer because it makes these things more expensive to buy.
Okay, so one thing I want to try to do, and I want to start off the conversation with you, is separating the debate about trade with Canada, Mexico, maybe the EU versus China, because I think they're really, really different situations.
I do too. I think you're right. And the reason I wrote my piece about, my first line of my piece is I hate tariffs. I think I don't like taxes. I like free trade. But when you got a country like China, that's very different from a country like Canada or Mexico. Canada and Mexico are not security threats to the United States. They're not engaged in mercantilist activities. They're not involved in cyber espionage against the United States. China is. Canada and Mexico don't steal from our intellectual property. For the most part, there's some going on, but they're much less than China. China is a rogue power. They're hostile to the United States. I believe they're an enemy, and they've acted like an enemy. And so I do think that there's a case to be made for using tariffs as a punitive measure to get China to behave itself. And that was the point that I was making in my piece. And I was saying, look, this is almost like this is the epic struggle of our time between China and the United States. It's almost like the new Cold War. And I want people to rally around the flag here and say, look, we're going to stick with the president on this. We're going to see this through, and China is going to have to relent. They're going to have to change their behavior, or we're going to hit them really hard with these tariffs because it will do significant damage to their economy. They sell $600 billion a year of products. They can't grow their economy if they don't have access to America's multi-trillion-dollar consumer market.
This reminds me a little bit, this scene, and I know that, and this is partly what got you in trouble recently, you've got a wacky sense of humor, so you will probably appreciate this more than most, but this whole thing with tariffs reminds me of this scene from the movie Blazing Saddles.
Hold it. The next man makes a move, the gets it.
And this is where the new sheriff, is holding a gun to his own head, threatening to kill himself.
Hold it, man. Yeah.
He's not
I
bluffing.
remember that scene.
Listen to him, man. He's just crazy enough to do it.
Rob it. or I swear I'll blow this head all over this town. Oh, Lordy Lord, he's desperate. Do what he say. Do what he say.
All right, sorry, Steve, I had to.
But there is some of that. I mean, it is a little bit of mutually assured destruction here. That it's a Mexican standoff we have with them, and to people who disagree with me. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm righteous here. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe Trump is wrong. But I've not heard a good explanation of what's the alternative. Do we just move forward and allow China to abuse us, to steal $300 billion a year from us, to, we open up our markets to them, they don't open up their markets to us? I mean, it's not a level playing field, and that's something Trump has complained about. And so I want somebody on your show to tell me what the alternative is if we're not going to hit them with these tariffs. Because to me, the only alternative is we just go forward with this relationship, which isn't working out so well for us.
Okay, so I'll try to take that on, but I think there are two separate issues. So I think the idea of an unlevel trading playing field where one market is more closed than another is a red herring. I think the value of trade is in imports, not in exports. I don't mind seeing exports, but this whole idea that we need to export more than we import is an ancient and discredited way of mercantilist thinking that's just wrong.
I'm not saying that, though. I'm just saying it would be a better thing for both countries if China opened up their markets to us.
It would be.
That we had a true level, true free trade agreement. Right now, we have an arrangement where we've, for the last 25 years, we've opened up our markets completely to China. That's how they've grown. They've become an export country. They grow by selling us stuff, but they haven't. American companies have a very difficult time selling whether it's our wheat, our cotton, our computers, our manufactured items. They don't open them up to us, and that puts, I think, our American companies and American workers at a disadvantage.
Right. Well, again, I mean, that's a very mercantilist argument, and it's one worth having. But at least, I think it should start from a point of view, if we're having it, that Americans will pay a severe cost in this trade war. But the other thing, and then you mention it a lot in your article, and that is theft of intellectual property and perhaps other issues of competition or even something stronger than competition outside of trade between us and China. I think that's serious and different in kind, not just different in quantity or degree versus other countries. And that's where I wonder whether maybe there's no choice, right? I mean, some people will argue he should have gone through the WTO, not picked a trade war with the EU.
That for a minute. I think the WTO is a totally worthless organization. It is feckless, and I think that the idea, we're gonna go after you with the WTO. No, I don't buy that. In fact, China is part of the WTO. They routinely violate the WTO, regulations on trade. And by the way, one thing I would say, I mean, look, this is a good conversation because I think we're presenting both sides of the equation here. What we produce in the United States more and more of is intellectual property. I mean, probably 40% of Americans are employed producing ideas and creative things and patents and copyrights and new ways of doing things and innovation. And that, if the other country doesn't pay for it, they're just cheating. That is what trade is, and we've got to protect our patents and our copyrights and our computer software and our drugs or vaccines, because if nobody else pays for it, then the American consumers have to pay the whole cost of all the development of all these amazing new technologies.
I agree with that, and I think that Trump is on that page. And politically, let's move to politics for a second, Steve.
Yeah.
I think we're in a position where, in the past, Trump would back down a little bit when he saw the stock market acting badly. I don't think he's going to back down this time, and I also don't think the Chinese leader is going to back down this time. And I think this kind of ongoing trade war is going to simmer. I think there will be a resolution, but I think it will take longer than people thought. What do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, I do not see Donald Trump backing down. And by the way, the worst possible outcome for us as a country right now would be for Donald Trump to back down, because that will only embolden China to continue its abusive behavior towards the United States. And no, we can't back down. We have to rally as a country around him and say, no, in fact, when you go to stores, don't buy anything made in China. Just if it's made in China, don't buy it. I mean, we have to get very tough with these people, because they're also building up their military in a very aggressive way. So, this is almost like Japan circa 1938. And that's one point I would make. And the other point I would make is, I do think you're right that in the end of the day, China is going to have to relent, because they need us more than we need them. We benefit from them, bringing in all this low-price stuff, and that's good for American consumers. You get all this stuff for 99 cents. But ultimately, China can't grow. They can't grow their economy if they don't have access to us. And so I think that gives Trump the leverage. I do think at the end of the day, Ross, by the way, my wife was saying we lost $20,000 yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bad day for the Moore household.
Right.
Our stocks just took a beating, and I hate that kind of day. But, I'm willing to make that kind of sense, because I think in the end of the day, when we get the trade deal done, and I think there will be a trade, I agree with you, in the next 3 to 6 months, there will be a trade deal. And then the stocks are going to go right back through the roof. So I think it's short-term pain for long-term gain.
So let me ask you one other question. I think we've got about 90 seconds left here, Steve.
Okay.
What do you support or not support the president saying he's going to take $15 billion out of the federal treasury and give it to farmers because they've been hurt for this?
That's a tough one, because, look, I hate, the government giving money to one group or another, but China's being very, very strategic here. They're basically, remember the whole, Russia collusion issue? Who can forget it? Oh, they're trying to interfere with our elections, right? Nobody's paying attention to China. What China is trying to do is interfere with our elections. Where are they going to impose their tariffs? They're imposing tariffs on Trump country, on the farmers, and we can't take that. We can't let the Chinese dictate who's going to win our next election. And so I do think we should. I should say I am open to the idea of holding the farmers who are the victims of this trade war harmless, because it's a cost that should be borne by all of us, not just one sector of the economy.
But what about when Ford says we're going to lose $1 billion because of Trump's metals tariffs, and so many other people losing money? It's just that the farmers are politically well organized.
Yep. I mean, trade wars are expensive. They incur damage, no question about it, just like a real war incurs damage. But sometimes you have to stand up to a bully, and I think that's what we're doing. And, there is cost. I'm not, as I said, we lost a lot of money yesterday. A lot of it. Don't look at your 401k accounts right now, because it's just, it's been, we lost 1,000 points on the Dow over the last couple of days. So this is going to be a painful process, but I think the American people are going to suck it up, and we're going to stand up to China, and we're going to defeat them in this, and they're going to stand down. At the end of the day, Ross, we're going to have freer trade, because they're going to lower their tariffs on us, and we may actually lower our tariffs on them. And then we have a Milton Friedman situation where everybody's happy.
And I'll tell you what, if that happens, I think it does tremendous things for Trump's reelection as well. I got to leave it there. Steve Moore's new piece, Why Free Traders and All Americans Should Back Trump on China Policy. We'll post it on the blog. Thanks for being here, Steve.
Thanks, Ross. Take care.
This report is sponsored by Colorado Department of Transportation.
Easy drive so far for your Tuesday morning. Nice and easy up and down the highways. It's a beautiful morning. Sunshine's going to be a factor. No big wrecks slowing down the interstates. I-25 corridor looks good for you downtown to the Tech Center. Coming through Commerce City, westbound 76, heavier, heading over to I-25. 70 loading up there both directions. The I-70 drive looks good if you're heading out to DIA. Security wait time at about 30 minutes. 225, Aurora Stretch, getting busier